Hi and welcome to the second of our videos on the Wessex Water project. And in this video I'm just going to really go quite quickly through some of the basic setup. So we're going to look at setting up initial customer and ward calculations, and then we'll set up templates, and then we'll explore setting up more complex calculations in those. And then that will lead us on to the third video where we'll actually look to import maybe 100 customers data, and so you can see how it all aggregates and starts to move and starts to look at actually delivering the project as we would want it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create in here I'm going to create what's called an entity model, because we're building an entity model. So I'm going to call it Wessex test, and I'm going to have an entity type, and I'm going to call it hackathon, because that's what we're doing. This is a hackathon test, so that's my new entity model, and under that it creates some entities, which are the things we're going to create, and the templates that we're also going to create. So at the moment both of these are empty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, first of all, just create some basic templates. So and then we'll use those. So first thing I'm going to create three. I'm just going to create the first one. I'm going to create it as call it a ward. The second one I'm going to create is just called a customer, and the third one I'm going to create is called an attractiveness index, which is an odd thing, but that's what I called it originally. So we're just going to call it thanks. That's it. That's my three. Actually, I'm sorry, I've just realised I've made a mistake. That shouldn't be called attractiveness index. It should just be called attractiveness. So this is where you're looking at trying to understand which is the best ward that we're interested in. So that's my three initial templates created. So now I have those, I'm going to go and create some of the basic meters. I'm not going to create any of the more the calculations at this time, because we'll actually create those dynamically so you can see them working. So the first thing I'm just going to do, I'm just going to create some of these items so that we can they'll be created from the basic template. So the first one I'm just going to create one called meter flow, and this is where we're going to be putting our raw data into. And then I'm going to be creating just a calculated item. A calculated item, and that's going to be called metered consumption. So that's my 2 meters created in the customer template, and I'm going to just create 4 calculations in the ward template. So I'm going to create, let me just create, these are all going to be calculated items. So the first one is going to be analysis period meter flow. So what I'm going to be doing in this meter is using the properties of the ward to select the calculation period that I'm doing the analysis for all of the underlying customers. So the next one I'm just going to be taking in some average meter flow. Sorry, my spelling isn't doing very well. And I'm going to be creating another one, which is my total meter flow. And then finally I'm just going to create one called ward attractiveness, which we'll only get around to using that in the next video. Oops. Attractiveness, if I spelled it right. So that's so I've now got 4 calculations set up in the entity template, the ward template, and I've got 2 calculations set up in the customer template. So the way that we load and we initiate these templates is that we will drop text files, or actually CSV files, into the importer on map, and immediately the importer picks those files up. It will use the entity template to create the underlying entities. So this is what the customer CSV looks like. So we're just creating one at the moment, just so we can play with the data and get all the calculations, and I can show you the calculations working, and then we'll replicate them across to the templates, and then we'll be positioned to import many more sites. So just these are unique reference. So these are properties. So this is the customer that we're importing into the model that we've got, which is called Hackathon. So this dictates the path that we're going to be finding the entity. It knows it's a templated entity, and it's using a customer template. So those four properties actually define the path. Actually, that unique reference number is just a property, and then these are all properties as well. So this is a property that we'll use to import the data on. We'll see how that works in a minute. So that's my customer template or data importer, and this is the one that I have for Ward. So it's the same sort of thing. This is my Wessex test hackathon templated entity. It's using a Ward template, and we're creating a group under that called Ward, and the name of my Ward is going to be Taunton Fairwater, and these are some properties. So all of these are properties of that particular Ward, and we can add as many as we want of these. We can just create add them to the CSV file, and map will automatically add the properties into the database. So we've also got some fields for analysis start time and analysis end time. So these are the properties that we'll use to dictate the analysis being used for all of the underlying customers that belong into this Ward. So if we now come up to the entities, so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to import the particular data files into map. So I'm just doing that now, and they should be imported straight away. And now if I go into the entities, we can see now that we've got a customer entity which has got customer 219. These are his properties, and these are the underlying meters items that we created a minute ago. And that's my meter alias, which has been added into the data, that particular field. And if we go back to Wards, we can see that we've created one called Taunton Fairwater. This is the analysis start time and end time that we had, and then these are all the underlying properties that we imported via the CSV file. So what I'm now going to do, I'm just going to import some data into this particular customer for this meter flow data, and the data looks like this. So this is just aperiodic data, so it comes in whenever. This is the alias that we're importing against. This is the date, and then this is the value. So these are, well, they should normally be counting type, or they are counting type increasing values, and you can see that the value is reset here. So this is the sort of data we got. So this is data taken every 6 months or so from the customer's water meter. So I'm just going to import that data now. So that's now imported that data. So that's the raw data, and we're seeing the drop when we reset back to 0, and that's the increasing value. So what I'm now going to do is I'm just going to configure the calculations for this particular item. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a calculation to say, right, we're going to get this data relative, and we're going to get it from the same directory, and it's meter flow. So that now tells map that it's going to use this particular meter, which is this one, to do the calculations. I'm going to just create a calculation in the start value expression. So this is what happens when it initializes and it starts the calculation. So basically it just looks at setting a value of 0 in the very first value, because if otherwise for an incrementing meter you'll always get a big spike in the data. And this is a incrementing meter, and we are going to distribute the values. So i.e. we're going to distribute the values into a daily basis across that database. So what we'll do now, we'll just wait for that to calculate, and so that's now been calculated. So what we've got is, this is the data which is derived from This is the underlying raw data, and so this is the data that's derived from that. So this is now on a consumption basis, so you can see the step changes for the data. So it goes back to 2010, so two values a year roughly. So these are the step changes, and these are the that have been aggregated across from the reads that have been made in that data. And so now we're just going to go into the into the wards, and we're going to set up these calculations. And what I'm going to later do is, once I've got these calculations working, you see how they work, then you transfer it through to the templates, and we'll replicate those in the templates, and then we'll be ready to import much larger data set. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to just create this particular item. So this is the calculation. This is going to be looking at aggregating all the meter flow values from all the individual customers. So what we're going to do is put this into a initialization expression. So we're just going to put a value of so this is, let me just expand that out. So I have just cut this and paste this from another meter just for simplicity. So basically what this is doing is it's getting all the data. We'll just make it a little bit wider. So it's going to be looking for the getting data from the customer data entities, and it's going to be looking for where the property of the ward, which is called, and the property is called the unique reference number, and that's going to be basically where that ward property in the customer equals the ward property on the particular ward. So that's what this particular calculation does. And when we've got that done, now we've got that initialization expression, so we're just putting it into a variable R1. We can now sum that across time. So that's the initial expression that we're creating for this total water meter flow. And what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to copy that, and I'm just going to put it into the average flow meter as well, because it's a very, very similar calculation, but this one is going to be average. So that's that particular value.